Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another session of Curiosity Talks, titled The Age Advantage: Why the Future Workplace Needs Every Generation. So, for the first time in history, 5 generations are working side by side. At the same time, AI is transforming work faster than ever before. And many of today's professionals could have careers lasting 50 or even 60 years. The question is no longer whether workplaces will become multi-generational. They already are. The real question is, how do we make every generation an advantage rather than a divide? Wisdom Circle is one workplace where employees as young as 23 share an invigorating environment with those who are 65 and above. We share learning and inspire each other every day. I personally benefit from all the reverse mentoring that my young friends do for me in teaching me how to adapt to new technology. So, surviving in today's workplace is all about a desire to know more. And even the great scientist Albert Einstein said, "I have no special talent. I am only passionately curious." And on that note, I am going to welcome the two speakers this evening: Pankaj Rai, Group Chief Data and Analytics Officer for Aditya Birla, and Anushri Alva, Knowledge Consultant with Wisdom Circle, to this discussion on why the workplace needs every generation. Both of you, welcome and good evening.
Thank you, Swati.
Thank you.
So, Anushri, let me jump in by bringing you in here. In your experience leading an organization with employees in their 20s through to their 50s and beyond, what have you learned about making multi-generational workplaces successful? And is it more about systems or people's attitudes, or is it mindset, or is it about their birth year? There are a lot of things going on. So I thought we could hear your thoughts about that.
So thank you, Swati, and thanks everyone for being here. I think, Swati, that's an interesting question, right? About what makes multi-generational organizations successful or good. And I think there are two things to address here. One is that, in my mind, a good multi-generational organization is a good inclusive workplace, right? And inclusion has many layers: gender, caste, class, age. Age is one layer in an inclusive work environment. And a work environment that's inclusive is one that's set up to be better for an age diverse group, right? And I have a small framework that I'll pull up in a second just to walk you through what I mean. But I do think there's an interesting nuance to when we talk about age diversity and inclusion, which is that I think the idea of generations is a myth, but the perceptions behind generations are real, right? What I mean by that is the idea of a generation in a family, like every 30 years, you have a new generation, parents, children, grandkids, right? That's like sociologically, that's how you would look at a generation in a family. But those cultural labels of Gen Z, Gen Alpha, Millennial, Boomer, those are cultural labels, and they're cultural labels that come from the US, right? Like the first time you start seeing labels like this is somewhere in the 1950s and 60s in the US, when suddenly there's a huge population that's in high school and college. And suddenly you have this category that's neither children nor adults. They're not working, but they're not really kids, and they're youth. And then you realize that this is a segment I can market to. So you start creating these labels around what these generations are called. So I feel generations are a myth, but I do think the perception of generations is real. And when it comes to the workplace, it does matter, right? Because when I would say, what do you think of Gen Zs in the workplace? Something will come to your mind. What do you think of a millennial in a workplace or a boomer in a workplace, right? So when I think about inclusive workspaces, the gender, the age layer for me is really about the perceptions of generations that start playing out in a workplace. I'll quickly show you a small framework that I think about when I think about what makes multi-generational workspaces successful. And you will see my own bias really playing out here, for which I So I see this like on two axes, like a good inclusive workplace that works for age diverse spaces as well is um, on one axis, you have the owner and designation. So individuals either see themselves as owners or they see themselves as their designation, meaning I see myself only as my role and I'll only do my role and I'll do nothing else but my role. Or I see myself as an owner where I really care about the purpose that we're serving, what we're doing, and I'll go above and beyond, right? And that's the individual. But then you have the institutional design of an organization. Is it exclusionary? Is it inclusive? Is it inclusive, right? And when I say inclusive, what I mean is, does it have systems in place for people's needs, voice, and strengths to sort of, come up? So I'll quickly take you through the 4 quadrants of what I mean by this, and then I'll pause, Swati. So let's start on the top left, which is really like where you see, where the ownership is really high for some individuals, but the design of the organization is a little exclusionary. What you find is like really motivated individuals finding solutions. So that's like Amitabh and Dharmender and Sholay, where they've come into this village that's like, oh God, we can't do anything. And they're really motivated, so they get stuff done. And that's what happens in an age diverse environment. In my workplace, what I would see is that I, once had an older person who was in their 60s who was struggling with our data dashboards, and she's in this remote place. And our data person is just not helping her. He's like, I've given you the link, use it, open it, you know what to do. And she could have really been like, I don't know what to do. But she went and spoke to like lots of different people, Googled it herself, figured it out, and she found her solution, right? There's like where she was holding ownership, but there wasn't, the design was not inclusive. If you think of the lower left quadrant, where like I see myself just as my designation and there's nothing inclusive about the way the org is designed, that's like conflict, right? That's Amitabh in, say, Divar, like where you feel you are wronged. You're doing the right thing, but you're wrong. You're the victim, right? So this would play out as where we would see people sitting in meetings, our younger team members who are working with school principals sort of being like, I'm doing my job. And the older person feeling like, I'm your mentor. I have a lot of skills. You're not even using my skills, but I'm not going to say anything either. You want to ask me, you ask me. And so both are just like saying, I'm doing my job, but you can leverage me the way I want to. And there being an impasse. Then you have like where people are holding out their designations, where we try to moderate the situation, and the organization is inclusive, right? You have systems to have people to talk through things and voice their needs and talk about their strengths. And that's where it's a very leadership enforced solution, where we as the org leadership stepped in and said, hey, there's a mentor who has great strengths and the ground reality. You guys have to work together, and that's how it's going to get really good. And it was very enforced by the org leadership. We were pushing it. And that's Amitabh enforcing in Zanjeer. But I think where you really want to get is like where everybody has a high sense of ownership, and you've created systems and processes where people can express their needs, can, have a sense of a voice in decision making, and can really leverage strengths, right? So that's like Amitabh wearing lights in dancing, which is really, I think, some of our spaces where we really got to a place of thriving in my organization. And just to give you context, sorry, we were an NGO working on making government schools better. And we had people who were in their 60s, we had people in their 20s, people in their 30s and 40s, and often the people in their 60s and 70s were mentors or organizational leadership to the younger people, who also had their own designations and titles and feeling of importance, right?
Yeah.
So I think the thriving workplace was really a space where we saw people co-create solutions, where they really could like think about what was their shared aim, where they really like figured out decision-making together. And that's sort of where I felt like having this inclusive organizational design and recruiting for people who show that high sense of ownership, or knowing who's sort of like exhibiting high sense of ownership. That's where I feel like diversity in general works, but with the age diversity in particular, I really felt like this is where it would play out. So Swati, I'll pause there.
Yeah. Oh, that's an amazing framework. And I think the age group that is here will definitely connect with the
That's
Amitabh
that's my
Bachchan.
bias. I feel like that's my assumption, right? After saying generations are a myth and then putting Amitabh.
Yeah. No, but the truth is, we know Amitabh. So I kind of think that maybe inclusion doesn't happen by accident and it has to be designed, or like you say, there are no generations, everyone gets along at the workplace. But even with the best systems, I think every generation bring different expectations to the workplace. So I'm imagining that, if today's young professionals are going to work for 50 or even 60 years, then I want your thoughts, Pankaj, that you worked with leaders across industries. So, what differences do you notice in how younger and experienced professionals define career successes today?
So just a comment on Anushi's chat. First of all, I loved it, but I also was thinking that will my daughters or some of my people in my team relate to Amitabh, or might they want a K-pop idol who will, which I don't know, but they will resonate with. So I think sometimes I've now realized that many a times I use analogies that make sense to me. Some of us who grew up with Ramayana, Mahabharata, I'll say, you know what? This is like that Ashwasthama mar gaya. They'll say, who's Ashwasthama and why did he die and what does it even mean? And for me, like it was so obvious that half truth or whatever it is. So I think we have to figure out how to use the right analogies with the right audiences. At least I'm also learning. And by the way, in our company, in our group, Aditya Birla group, we actually have 21-year-olds in my team, which we hire. And we do have many people who have been on extension and they are 70. So in many ways, they are like the grandparents, and they sometimes come back to me and say, "Yeah, how do I deal with so and so?" So the main thing that I have been sort of utilizing to tell people when they come to me, 21 years, I'm a fresher, I don't know anything. I tell everyone that every one of you has a life experience of 21 years or whatever number of years. So first of all, don't imagine that the organization is existing in isolation. The organization exists in the context of a society. And all these people that you see here, imagine an equivalent in your family. That might be your granduncle or Mossy or Chachi or whatever it is. And frankly, we've seen these characters one way or the other. So don't think that this is totally new. This is not new. My favorite analogy is when people say, "Oh, I have two managers, one dotted line and one solid line." So confusing. I said, when you were a baby, you had two managers, mom and dad, and you were so smart that you utilized both of them for their strengths. And later on, you started managing, grandparents, four of them, and many others. So don't ever think that you can't manage it too. You have been managing many without even speaking. So the main point, Swati, that I try to make to people is that these are human beings. Don't think of them in terms of titles and the dress that they hold or the designation that they hold. These are human beings. They are probably at your home or in your friends' homes, and try to relate to them in the same way that when you're that difficult uncle, you leveraged, his daughter who was your cousin to get along and or get over him or whatever it is. So if you want to manage the context, manage the environment, use the skill that you probably already have, and you can hone them. So the main point I'm making is that I try to make people believe that don't look at an organization as one totally new thing that has happened to you. It's a microcosm of the society that you have lived in. It's a slight variant. It has some rules, it has some this thing, but you can figure that out. So I think that's the approach that I'm dealing with to make sure that they don't feel helpless and they feel more on the owner side rather than a victim side, because everyone think that when they come into a team, they are the more helpless and the most voiceless people in the team. And I try to tell them that actually you have a lot to tell, because frankly, many of those people have children like you and they struggle to understand them. So maybe they will use you as a surrogate to understand them, and that's the value you can add to their lives and tell them and think. So net you have to tell people how they can add value to other people who are senior to them in designation. But there are experiences of yours that can be relevant to them, and you've got to figure it out and find a symbiotic relationship and so on and so forth.
Yeah, what I'm hearing, Pankaj, is it's a lot about human connections. And what also struck me from Anushri's framework is that thriving workplaces depend on inclusive institutional design, but also flexible individual attitudes, right? One statistic I came across, and that puts this talk into perspective, is that by 2050, 1 in 6 people globally will be over the age of 65. So we are not just adding years to life, we are adding decades to our careers. And perhaps the new career path is not so much about education, work, and retirement. It must be about learning, reinventing, and contributing again and again. Uh, So, on that note, Anushri, I wanted to know if reporting to someone younger managing someone older, disagreement over work styles, these situations sometimes tend to create friction. And what's the best way that you have seen organizations navigate these moments? Pankaj has told us his viewpoint on how he advises people who have these issues. What is your experience been?
So I think conflict is normal in any workplace, right? Disagreements about stuff is normal in any workplace. It's not particular to having an age diverse workplace. But I do think there's a nuance to an age diverse workplace, which is that um, like in there's this sociologist Bobby Duffy who talks about how like it's in when you look at a generation or like different age groups, it's not really the age that's determining how people are reacting to stuff. It's often like the life cycle, so which means like what life stage are you in?
Yeah.
So are you at a place where you've just left home? Is this your first job? Have you just gotten married? Are you having a kid? Have you retired? Like where are you in your life cycle? And I think that plays a role when it comes to fiction in an age diverse workplace, in my experience. And so like if I were to give an example, like we had a team member in his 30s who had been managing one state program for us with a state government where they were improving like about 1,400 government schools, right? And so he had a big mandate. He had a team of a bunch of people in their 20s and 30s under him working with them. And we felt that the mandate was getting bigger and bigger, where you had to really work with high level bureaucrats in the state. You needed to work with the chief minister. So you really needed someone very seasoned who had run many schools, who had worked with government, who had worked at scale to come in and mentor this team and be that face with some of the senior people. And so we brought him a mentor who, again, was like in their 70s and very, very sharp, amazing sort of person who had like a lot of experience. And he kept not including her in anything, kept removing her from meetings, wouldn't call her for stuff, would just do stuff with his own team. And we couldn't understand it. We're like, here's an asset, like, who'll really help you. You know, now you have to scale from 1,400 schools to 3,000 schools. Like, she's going to help you do it. You don't know how to do that. Here's an asset, use her. And I think what really helped to understand was his life cycle and where she was, right? He was at a stage where he was in his mid 30s. He sees himself as a provider, he sees himself as a leader. I feel like the other thing with the life cycle is that professional identity that comes in a workspace. Outside, if I meet an older person, I'm not coming in with my professional identity. But when we're in a workplace, here I am managing this team. I have this professional identity. And I feel like that professional identity is important. And now you've come in and you are going to maybe circumvent me. And the second is he's in his mid 30s, about to start a family, like provider identity, all of that happening. And then you're starting to feel like, who's this person? And now where's my ability to make decisions, right? And I think there, what really worked was one, recognizing that, and she was coming from a place where she had retired. She'd already done everything. She was not trying to get recognition, or she'd met all the important people, done everything. So she could understand maybe or see the fact that he was struggling with wanting to be visible, wanting to be seen as important. And I think that was the meeting ground, right? Acknowledging what life cycle they're in, acknowledging where they are in their professional trajectory, and then creating spaces where they could co-create a plan together rather than her coming in and saying, hey, I know what we can do, or him saying, no, I know what we can do. Saying collectively, what is your shared ambition? What do you hope will happen for schools here in 3 years? And if that has to happen, what are each of your strengths? And her strengths were really state facing, talking to these high level people. His strengths were really like getting the ground reality mobilized and having relationships at many levels. So really saying that both of them had strengths that were valuable, that were visible, but they could also like co-create where they wanted to take it without undercutting each other. And I think that was my insight over there with conflict and age diversity, right? Recognizing professional identities and life cycle and saying, how's that playing out in the workplace?
So I'm wondering, Pankaj, in your years of experience managing diverse teams, have you come across an instance where uh, experience, when combined with fresh thinking, with younger thinking, has led to better decisions or an innovation or something that has worked out really well when these two combine?
And I'm sure everyone will say that it always does. And again, go back to the family analogy, and you spoke about seniors and juniors. And we have so many times seen two archetypes very commonly across probably all family, that you are a young person, but there is this uncle or auntie who's quite old, but they are your best friends, and they hang out together and they share secrets. Everyone has had one such experience. The other archetype is that there is this older person who's not tech savvy, and they always call you that you are the boss, you do this for me, and I don't know anything about it, right? So we have seen such interdependence in our families across the board. I mean, there's no family which won't have that. So I think we have seen that experience already. The question is, how do you build on that experience? That because I think like Anushri put it very nicely, that in any teamwork, I think the common factor is a sense of shared goal. It could be a marriage, it could be a cricket team, it could be your office team or whatever, and a sense that we both need each other to succeed. Now, if you both are strikers and one of them, maybe that's not the right team. Then maybe you need to team. But you got to have complementary skills, and everyone knows that the other thing I can't do. I'm a salesperson, you are a product person. We both need each other. So I think we have to figure out the right team where the goal is clear, the roles are clear. It not always is, but that's how we need to make sure that these conflicts can get resolved. Because I know if I'm a sales guy and I'm not a product guy, I know I can't do your job. So I'll overlook a few of your whatever eccentricity that you bring to the table. And I think that's what I find, that can we spend some time in just making sure that whichever that team is, they have a very sense of good sense of the shared goal, and also a keen sense that everyone brings different skills to the table, and they can't win without each other. Now, it's not easy, but if we all focus on making that clear over time, I think the team becomes stronger and the conflicts reduce.
Yeah, it's interesting that you both mentioned this because I came across an instance, and I'm going to take a little time to just share that. I was coaching a manager from one of the big four, and the issue with that person was that they were unable to collaborate or delegate to anybody. And over my sessions with this person who was older, I realized that they could not collaborate with younger people because of the insecurity that they were feeling. So they would absorb all the work, complete all the tasks by themselves just because they were feeling insecure that the other younger teammates would outshine them in terms of technology, in terms of knowing the latest tasks and things like that. So it took a lot of talking for that person to be able to see why they were doing that. So I understand that this happens at the workplace. And then again, like you said, Anushri, it's all at the human level. I've seen that research shows that both the youngest and the oldest employees report experiencing age related bias quite often. And probably that tells us something important, that ageism isn't a problem of one generation against the other. It's a workplace issue that affects people differently. So I think we have to learn to value these differences and then work with them. And like Pankaj said, find that shared goal that both teams can contribute to. So again, Pankaj, I'm going to ask you an interesting question, which I think you might like. What do you think of how Federer, as a younger person, succeeds, not only as a younger person, but as an individual, versus the way the F1 team wins races? And should organizations continue rewarding individual stars, or does the future belong to these teams made of different generations and different skills and different perspectives? I'm waiting to hear your answer.
Yeah. So I think, so I was in the office of Anthropic yesterday, the people who make Claude, and we were asking them that, what are you guys seeing with this whole AI coming in and all of that? So one thing that they said, and it sort of resonates with me, they said, we were having these two pizza teams, which Amazon and others pioneered, and they said you shouldn't have large teams, you should have two pizza teams. We are now seeing, a muffin team, like, two people. You don't need eight people. In fact, two is more than enough. One product guy, one Jason. So I think the point that I'm making is that the size of the team to deliver a job in terms of human beings is shrinking. I think few people, in fact, I'm observing in my own team organically That earlier people would say, oh, can I get a contractor? Can I get another resource? And now people are saying, I don't need as many people. I have enough tools and this thing. In fact, that other person is a distraction. It slows me down. So number one is we need to recognize that we don't necessarily need large teams for many of the things which where technology can enable. And therefore, that's one part of it. And the second part is therefore that other part is obvious that, you got to see that you have to have complementary skills. In fact, the presentation that the Claude people were making to us, and I was later reflecting and telling my team that there were two people. One of them was a SME industry expert. He knew all about Aditya Birla. The other chap was a technical expert, and he'll bring in, what we are doing in the US and how the technology roadmap looks like, and what are the new mythos type models that they're experimenting, which will come and see the light of the day, right? So one was coming from a tech standpoint, and this. I'm also kind of resonating with what Naval Ravikant, who's a famous investor in the Valley, says that frankly, the companies just need two people. There are just two roles left now. One you can call the product person, the other is the engineering person. And by product, you mean someone who understands the customer, the product, and this, that, and the other person this. So at some level, I think while we have created many roles, many responsibilities, many jargon, at a very basic level, actually, you can simplify it much more through some of these technologies. And therefore, the need for our people to think of their jobs in a much more broader sense than the JD, because you still have 50 JDs in the company. So I have been at least telling my team that, figure out, are you the product person or the engineering person? And whatever it is, you have to make an impact using the muscle that you have or you will develop, and just make a business impact. Forget what that JD was, because I can't change the JD overnight. But you got to imagine your own identity. And I think identity was talked upon is very important. So I create frameworks as well. I don't have a chart, but I just say the framework. So I have a 3P framework: process, product, purpose. So I said 30 years ago, people were process owners. Later on, when product came in and tech became this thing, the value migrated from process ownership to product ownership. And now the value has migrated to the top tier, which is the purpose ownership. And purpose is nothing esoteric, it's just the business impact. So I tell people that you got to be the purpose owner, own a business metric, learn the process, learn the product, learn whatever. But unless you own the business impact, nothing else is relevant. So I do think that the ease with which I think today people can own a topic is far more easy today than it was ever before, because earlier you need hundreds of people to do so many things. Now fewer people can do it, and your ability to value add can be seen very so I actually think that today is a much easier or a better place for anyone to function and make an impact, because you can immediately create value. It can be seen, versus in the large cog in the wheel situation where there were 20 people doing something, you didn't know what you were doing. Today in a two people tone, it's very clear who's doing what. So I do think that we can look at AI and the new technology as a boon to say, can we quickly all do exactly what needs to be done and sort of share the credit, because we are doing different things, orthogonal things, and together we are making an impact, versus this haze of hundreds of people doing things that no one knew who was accountable for what.
So coming from that, from teams becoming smaller and AI coming in a big way, Anushri, as organizations pursue performance, and how many people do what, where does purpose come in? Where does emotional regulation come in? And where does continuous learning come into the future workplace?
I think Pankaj already touched upon that idea of purpose, right? Like you have to create an impact, and that's purpose. Um, though I feel like it also puts the question, I think, like Pankaj said, of relevance. Relevance was usually a thing that happened. Oh, you've finished your career, now you've stepped away, now you're thinking about, am I relevant? I think people are now thinking of relevance and purpose are in crisis much younger, right? Where you're like, oh, now what am I doing? My job is just done so quickly by AI. Who am I now? And I think for people who are younger, who've not yet established an identity or built enough of a practice or expertise or knowledge, and something that can be quite, it can shake you quite a bit, right? But I think that is the space of reinvention we're in. Like I worked with schools for the longest time. For 15 years, I was working with public schools. And our biggest question in that space really was, what future are we preparing children for? Children today are going to live longer and have 5 to 10 careers, right? So what does that mean? What do I prepare you for in school? Is it content knowledge is becoming irrelevant every 5 years? So am I teaching you to learn? Like, are you developing the skills to learn, right? And learning, I think, becomes really crucial. Swati, you said purpose, emotional regulation, learning. Learning, I think, is what will give you purpose, because if you keep learning and you stay
Right.
curious, that's your biggest asset, right? Like to continue to learn, to understand where the pulse is at. But to the question of emotional regulation, I thought that was really interesting because there's a recent book that came out called Love Machines, which talks about how the nature of our relationships has changed with AI and all of that coming in, because now you're reducing all the friction in your life, like right from reducing friction from the fact that, I can Swiggy something or Blinkit something in 10 minutes. I've now reduced the friction in my relationships too. And I've often heard that from older team members in my team, where they would say that, we're having there's some issue happening, and I want to just pick up the phone and talk. And the younger person doesn't want to talk to me. They're sending me messages on Discord and on this and on that. I just want to talk to you, talk to me. Whereas, like, maybe a lot of people are much more comfortable just writing and sending emojis. And there's been this whole thing about emojis. What emojis are okay? And like, I remember young people being like, she keeps giving me thumbs ups. That's really passive aggressive. And I was like, she doesn't know thumbs ups are passive aggressive, right? But the point that we are now communicating so much in this way that we are reducing the friction, where people are now having relationships with AI where you can tailor it to talk to you exactly how you want to be spoken to. It won't fight with you. There are all these products being developed around that where you have this partner who's perfectly lovely to you. And so you don't ever have to deal with an actual human with their actual human emotions. And if that's the world we're finding ourselves in, what does that mean for workplaces where you have to have emotional intelligence to work with people, right? And if the people are reducing, how do we rewire? So I think that's a question I'm sitting with. But the purpose part, I definitely agree with what Pankaj was saying. And learning to me is like absolutely like the bottom line, right? But the emotional regulation, I'm still sitting with.
In connection with that, on a lighter note, I must say, Anushri, whenever my colleague Mansi just picks up the phone and calls me and she's apologizing, sorry, Swati, I didn't message you before I called. And I say, oh my God, I'm so happy that you called. Please do that more often. You don't have to message me before you call because I'm used to people picking up the phone and calling me. That's what we used to do in those days. But yeah, there's a podcaster called Brené Brown. I don't know if you heard her, and she describes performance as potential minus interference. And I love that saying. Perhaps the biggest interference in multi generational workplaces isn't age at all. I think it's just assumptions that we have about each other. And if we replace these assumptions with curiosity, I think we unlock the complementary strengths, the mentoring, and all the fresh perspectives that you all have been speaking about. So, Pankaj, you have often said that people are paid not for their potential, but for converting it into kinetic value. I want you to explain that because I loved it when you said it on the other podcast. And as AI reshapes jobs and careers are becoming longer, what is the biggest disruptions that organizations should prepare for? Not just the people, but organizations.
Yeah. So I think the potential kinetic was just coming from the fact that a lot of people have lots of ideas and lots of thoughts and lots of tiny bits of deliverables. But I keep saying that eventually the final business outcome is what creates value. And many a time people don't see the end-to-end value chain. They do some bits of the job and feel that they've done the job and the rewards should flow. So the idea really is to say, and I still remember 10, 15 years ago, I attended a class by Professor Ramcharan, and he probably summarized it the best this idea. He said, whenever an employee enters your company, the two things that you need to do is first, tell them how does your company make money? And second is, how does what they do enable that making money? I think it is so simple. But I think if you got to go to employees in any company, most of them will not know the answer of both those questions. Sometimes they may know the first question, certainly the second one, sometimes they don't. So I think it's as simple as that. For me, that kinetic was that, are you sure what you did eventually did something? So in our case, people make data science models. Yeah, great model. Where did it apply? Who used it? Where did the money get saved or created and things like that? And sometimes people don't know, oh, I gave it to someone and whatever, right? So that was the potential kinetic thing. But since talking to folks in Anthropic and Claude, I moved on to one other hypothesis of mine. I won't call it a theory. That what's likely to happen, at least in some spaces, all these agentic AI and agents, they will get created and they'll be autonomous and they'll be doing things. So in some senses, Earlier, it was potential, and we had to put human labor to make it kinetic. Now, the default will be kinetic, and the value will be generated by people who can govern it and guide it, which is the reason
Right.
they're hiring philosophers to say, how should you govern this? So maybe in some areas you still need to put human effort to turn, coal into fire and some machine into this thing, potential into kinetic, the traditional way. But there'll be many other areas where the default is kinetic, which is like a nuclear reaction, which is going on. Your job is to control it, guide it, harness it versus letting it go rogue, which is happening in the agentic world. So I do think we have to figure out what context are we in. Some places potential to kinetic got to be rewarded. In other places, the governance of the kinetic might need to be rewarded as well. And that is a new skill that we need to develop because that's not something that we've been thinking about in the past.
Yeah, governance of the kinetic, that's such a critical part, I think. And though technology may change how we work, I think workplaces succeed because of the people, at least for a little more while before it is completely taken over by AI. So, which brings us to an equally important question, not about technology, Anushri, but about culture. And you have said that diversity makes organizations, right? It makes it richer because it brings perspective that we wouldn't otherwise have. Why do you believe the future workplace needs every generation and not just the latest one?
I mean, I think even the current workplace needs everyone, but the
Yeah.
future one maybe needs more. And maybe I'll pick up from where Pankaj spoke about AI. And I think that's a really important point, right, about the governance of the kinetic, because that is where the world is moving and one needs to sort of move there. Uh, but what's been interesting about the younger workforce right now, and like all these studies that are coming out, is this term of cognitive debt, that when you're like meeting younger people who are coming into the workplace right now, they're like Pankaj calls Claude Uncle Claude, right? Like they're just like writing everything into Uncle Claude and Uncle Claude's giving you an answer and then you come back. So you've not done the process of actually thinking and working through something. You've got an end product and you're shoving it. So CXOs across 70 companies were like interviewed, and they talked about this idea. For an individual, it's cognitive debt. As a young person, I'm coming in and I'm just putting stuff into ChatGPT or Claude. It comes out, I'm pushing that down. Now, when that compounds across an entire company, they're calling it the distributed descaling. That now there's distributed descaling happening in companies. Now you have all these young people who are not developing skills, and the skills that they were talking about are skills like judgment, critical thinking, the ability to identify a problem, frame a problem, and then think of how to solve a problem. Because those are all process oriented things, right?
Yeah.
Which happen while you think. And if you're eliminating that process completely, and especially when you're young, when you're older, you've already had a career of doing that. So it's coming at you at a stage where you've already practiced doing that. It's not getting eliminated before you've learned how to do it. And I think that's something really worth sort of understanding, because that's where I feel having seasoned, older mentors working with younger people becomes really important. Like if I were to think of myself, right, when we set up the NGO, I was 27. Like, what did I know? Like, what do I know today? Who knows? But like, what did I know at 27? And my co-founder was 30 years older. She's like as old as my mother, who had spent like an entire career in education, was such an amazing mentor to me. But I feel like I had a lot of technical, theoretical knowledge. I'd studied abroad. I'd come with all these credentials. I'd done all this work. But I think the things where she really brought in something that I never could have, that I could have only learned from her, was this where there is discomfort. You know, when there's ambiguity and when there's discomfort. So ambiguity was like, for example, when we were 2.5, 3 years old, we lost our main donor during COVID, and we had to downsize our org like nothing because I had not diversified funding. And I was in a complete mess thinking, now my organization is going to shut down, right? And the only way I got through that was because she and an older board member sat with me, and they talked me through things they've gone through. And they were like, look, we'll figure this out. This will pass. Like, this is how we'll approach it. Because I was like, in shock. I couldn't understand what COVID was, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like that ambiguity, being able to say, okay, we don't have a pathway, but we're going to get there, comes with experience. And you need older folks to be mentoring younger folks with that. I think the other thing was discomfort, having really difficult conversations, having the conversations nobody wants to have, and having them in a way that's not polarizing. Like today, I mean, look at the NEET issue and look at how polarizing it's become when young people are talking about something that's devastated their future. We are having such a polarizing debate. And I know that all the seasoned folks I worked with who are mentors to me are the ones who really knew how to hold spaces like that, where you could say things that were very disparate, but find a way to come together. And I really feel like in a way, in a world where we're talking about cognitive debt and distributed de-skilling and a younger workforce not even having the chance to develop those skills, I really feel like there's room for that multi-generational, age-diverse workspace.
You talked about kids not just putting things into chat and Claude and getting answers. And when I was coaching at IIM Udaipur recently, I was sharing with them a Mercer Metal report, which said that only 50% of young managers who are studying to be doing MBAs are employable. And why? Because they lack in the critical skills like just communication or creativity or curiosity or critical thinking. And I think that is one kind of stage where we all are at, AI versus the curiosity and creativity that our younger generations need to have. And Anushri, I'm wondering if every generation could leave one gift for the next, what would you hope it would be? And I'll come to Pankaj with the same question.
I don't know. I think like if I think about myself, I think for the mentors who were older, it was always a sense of you'll be okay. You'll be okay. And that feeling, you just need somebody to be there to anchor that. And I think the younger generation giving an older generation great memes, like fun memes. what's new, like knowing what's current and knowing what the pulse is currently. I feel like often we used to, like older team members used to be like, they'll be using some word and then the team would be like, that's not politically correct. You can't say that anymore. This is the new word. And they'll be like, how many words are there for things, right? So I feel like that's just staying current, having a pulse. But for my mentors, to me, it was always, yeah, you'll be fine.
Pankaj, what do you think? What would be a gift that one generation could leave for the next?
My father had long ago, I don't know when, told me something, and maybe in some other context, where he said, whatever question you are searching answers for, look at nature. Nature has solved pretty much everything, but you need to look hard to figure out what is relevant to you. So I think somehow that thought has stayed me, and I have kind of modified that thought to also say that look at the context in which you are, and you can't go against the context. You can't flow against the tide, right? So today, the analogy that I use with my team is the context of agile product management. So in our world, I think these types of terms are very common. Earlier, there was this idea of waterfall, and agile product management said that you frankly don't know the future. Your main job is to just figure out the best feature to add and launch. You learn from experience. If it doesn't work, drop it, add something new. And continuous evolution is the only answer. You don't know where this product will be from 1 year, 2 years from now, but you will be making sure it will be better than today. More users, more this, that, and the other. So I said, if this is the future that you are creating around you, can this not be the same for your own life and career? Can you be the product manager of your own life? Can you keep adding features to yourself? Some will work, some will fail. Sometimes you'll get laid off, sometimes you'll get demoted, sometimes you'll not get the increment, and others you will. So you will have that same zigzag life is like the product that you are creating, because how can your life be different from the product and the company in the context in which you are growing? So I would say this is nothing new, but the idea to say look at the context. If the context is behaving in a certain way, your life cannot be a straight line. So I tell them that at least in my last 30 years, in general, careers were a bit of a straight line. You got promoted, you went this way, and life was a bit sort of straight line. You had 5-year plans. Now even Sanjeev Sanyal says, our economic advisor, that there's no need to have a 5-year plan. We need to be agile, and we do. So I think everyone in different spheres of life, not just in technology but economics and politics, are kind of very agile and very reactive. So the system is very dynamic. All the pestle variables, politics, economics, social, technological, environmental, legal, all six of them are at play. No one can imagine the next model, and therefore the only way to sort of succeed and thrive, I think, is to be agile. Just be sensing, evolving, and that's it. don't think about the future, career, all that. But we have actually saddled ourselves with a set of taxonomy and questions, which is very hard to shake off because the new taxonomy and the new questions are not very common. So people still ask, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? Where will be my next job? When I will become like you? And whoever tells me that I want to become like you, I said, whatever my role is will not exist next year. So don't even try to be like me and things like that.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the point I'm making is try to be in alignment with the environment and the ecosystem, try to sense the nature of that, and your life has to be aligned to that. It can't be contra to that. And today I think the agile is the way to go, continuous evolution is the way to go.
Taking that word agile, Pankaj, I want to know whether you think that AI is a divide between digital natives and everyone else, or will adaptability to it become the great equalizer?
I think, every technology, and I think, obviously everyone says that this technology is different. Humans invented technology to make life easy, to reduce effort. Now, so it does reduce effort. So it does need less
Yeah.
labor. Now we are saying, hey, it's taking away jobs. So I think it was your problem that you defined your job at a process level. Your job is to define your job at a purpose level. And the purpose level is fairly wide. There's no end to it. So I
Yeah.
think we have defined jobs at a more tactical level, and then it gets automated. So of course the weaver defined his job to sort of clothe people, but when the handlooms came in, their job got lost. The candle maker defined their job to, provide light, but electricity took away their job. So I think we humans have created technology to reduce effort, make it simpler, efficient, faster, and it does take away some jobs. Some people get reskilled, some others don't, and we have to take care of them. But technology will have to move on. So I think today, and I know so many other initiatives. My friend Madan Padki is doing this Jan AI that, every village, every kid, 1 crore of them should be using AI to sort of do things at every level. So I think in our country where people like Nandan also look at UPI and this digital infrastructure as a force which will touch the bottom of the pyramid, we should think of this technology in our country as a way to, to use Gandhiji's word, the poorest of the poor, or the person who's the most emancipated. How do we help them? And that's what I think the power is, because the way these Sarvam model is being created by, Vivek Raghavan and many others, I think they're all trying to create things which are frugal, relevant to India. They are not serving the top tier, which the Western people are doing. So I am very, very positive about the Indian deep tech ecosystem, where I think many of these solutions will be utilized by creators who have a good heart and a smart brain, and they will create many, many solutions which will be very unique to India, and they can be leveraged by elsewhere in the world as well.
While you speak about AI replacing jobs, of course, to make life easier for us, sometimes we feel that AI might replace curiosity. And in that context, Anushri, do you think the younger generation is still curious enough to learn something from, the older mentors, or vice versa? Does that curiosity still exist, or everything is now dependent on Uncle Claude and Auntie Google?
I think, one of the things one of my mentors used to always say is that learning is like breathing. As humans, you can't stop yourself from learning. I think we've been told that learning looks like a very formal thing because that's the way our schools are set up. But in reality, every experience you have, every person you watch, everything that happens to you teaches you something, and you adapt. Your body adapts, your brain adapts, everything adapts, right? So I think I really think of learning in that way, that you can't divorce it from a human being. A human being is naturally curious. It really is about how do you find that maybe equilibrium in a moment right now where everything feels shaken and certain things felt a little stable to you up to a few years ago. Like you had studied something and you were going to do a job, and now that job is not going to look like that, or that world is not going to look like that. And so it's that period of adjustment, right, with AI and whatever we're seeing. Um, but I don't feel like I feel people are naturally curious and want to learn and seek out what their questions are and finding answers to that. Yeah.
So at this point, I just wanted to open the session for any questions or observations that our audience might have. Or Anushri and Pankaj, if you have any questions for each other, I think it would be wonderful.
We'll wait for the audience a bit, and if they don't,
Also,
then
I
maybe we
think
can
there's
ask
some
each
stuff.
other.
There's some stuff in the chat, I feel also that.
Yeah, those are, I think, just there were some observations, but and we would welcome to hear from the audience.
Hey, thanks Pankaj and Anushri for a wonderful session filled with anecdotes. But my specific question is, with this multi-generational workforce, what are some of the activities that you can think of? Back in the day, we probably would have these team meetings, right, or offsites, or let's say sort of quarterly connects, etc., right, which were prevalent. Now, are some of those activities and exercises fruitful with this multi-generational workforce, or do you have any other such activities that can bring this team together and um, build that purpose that Pankaj was talking about to both of you?
I think while I have not actively done anything, but I was thinking of activities that rely totally on capability and not on age. And the only thing that came to my mind was Antakshari. And that is an old game that we used to play where it didn't matter how old you were, what gender you had, and everyone on one team, kind of came together, and we never felt who was old, young, whatever. I think today's organization design and the pyramid is, I think, misleading people because it is creating a structure which no longer exists and doesn't play the role that it is supposed to do. Because frankly, in fact, the whole management thinking was born in the industrial era to organize something which was predictable. So when you design a management process or a whole management, the entire field of management was designed for predictability. Now, in this new world, we are designing everything for experimentation and failure and evolution. So the goal of the current need, and not to say that we don't need predictability anymore or precision anymore. So precision and predictability are still required in some manufacturing organization where you have to execute. But to innovate, we need a lot more of the other. But there is no management theory, there's no management thinking, there's no org design within the companies to do that. So unfortunately, since that is not getting invented, we have to create mechanisms to make people believe that you are a flat team and all of that. So at least in my team, which is a young team, I try to talk to them, have more frequent one-on-one, be curious, ask them questions, make them believe that they are contributing all that. But I think there's no organized way in which people are able to bring teams together and do it more holistically. I think everyone is doing their own experiment in their own way, in their own context. Kalyan.
Okay.
More needs to be done. I don't have an answer. Yeah.
I think, of course, like my team used to do like an annual retreat where everybody go together and we'd like think through like what we're doing for the year, but also do fun things. But I think it can't be a one-off thing. It has to be designed, right? Where by design you have spaces where you reflect together, think together about where you're headed, what you're doing. Also spaces which are not just like let's get through a checklist, but also where you see where a person is at and who a person is as a human being. And I think that has to be like those relationships have to be built through the year. It can't just be something that we have happen once or so. We had a lot of like reflective spaces apart from like spaces where people were just getting through what is our, what are we delivering and are we delivering well and all of that, but also like spaces about how are you feeling about what we're doing? How are you feeling about how we're working with each other? How are we feeling about the impact we're creating? Is this really the impact we thought we would create? What are we learning about all the things in this world of ambiguity where, your plans you can't really plan in the way you thought you would? What are you learning? One of our questions always to our teams was, what are your insights? Every few weeks we would then say, what are your insights? What are you noticing? What are your insights? What is that telling us, right? So I feel like those spaces where people get to talk to each other that way and unpack and not just deliverable focused, I think helped build a lot more interesting layered conversation that helped you sort of work better with each other. So that was my experience.
Thank you for the insightful session. I just have some couple of questions. Dr. Madhavan from Hyderabad. Actually, I just I just want to add on because this knowledge, this AI-driven corporate world, basically this judgment and bias. There, the older generation can help a lot. The younger generation when it comes to when it comes to delivering on these specific topics. And then the other the observation was you were asking a question. Swati was asking a question on whether the award should go to a team or should it go to an individual? So I come from a traditional organization where manufacturing organization where it was awarded to a team. So that played a lot of role. The award goes to a team, an Excel award goes to a team. So this kind of thing, I think, is more beneficial in the present day world. So I leave it to you, of course, for the discussion as to.
Just a small introduction. I need more clarity, Anushri, on the young person's curiosity in the world of this AI, which is definitely getting affected. I am associated with a school in Kotadawar, Uttarakhand. So the AI, right from younger generation, like yesterday also, there was a news article that Punjab government, class 1 to class 12, they have become the first state. So I need a bit of more elaborate explanation as to how the students of primary classes be indoctrinated into this AI culture vis-a-vis the senior lot beyond the college stage and all. All you experts may be able to.
I have two thoughts on this. There is such a huge body of research right now from all over the world and India that tells you that introducing tech at a very young age is not helpful. Whatever people we may say, it doesn't make sense. It's a lot better to have children doing sensorial things outdoors, developing motor skills, cognitive skills, lots of things. So there's a whole body of research there. Now, the other part is that as they get a little older and they get to middle school, AI is coming in everywhere, right? But I think what it's fundamentally questioning, what Pankaj said is very true, that you talked about the management industry being set up for the industrial age. Schools were set up in the industrial age. Schools were set up to create factory workers, and they still look the same. You sit in rows, somebody teaches you set content, you write an exam on that set content. That makes no sense in today's world, right? So I think what's interesting is kids now, when they get assignments from the time they're 11 onwards, in all schools, we see kids just putting it into AI. The essay is fully done. You submit that essay. And the problem is not the child doesn't have curiosity. The problem is you don't have an imagination in terms of how a child can demonstrate what they're curious about and what they care about. Because you're giving them such, when I ask young kids, why are you using Claude? They're like, what a dumb assignment I've been given. I'm not going to spend my time on this. Like I know kids who are on tech, but also who'll go out and play with insects and look at every single insect that there is, or go and like try to develop and build something of their own. Like school is not matching up with their curiosity. So I feel like it's really fundamentally shaking what schools are meant to do, right? In this age and in the context of work and longer lives, it's really about what are you preparing people for? And I think the model is archaic, right? So it's not kids don't have curiosity. I think the model doesn't have an imagination.
Thank you, Anushri. And I think with the clock striking 6, we have to come to the end of this very interesting discussion. And I think we can go on for longer. And I'm sure I'll have you and Pankaj back for another session. And as we conclude, I am reminded that the future workplace doesn't belong to one generation. I think it belongs to anyone who's willing to learn, to listen, to adapt and evolve together. And Pankaj, AI may transform the way we work, but I think finally trust, curiosity, mentorship and human connection remains uniquely ours. Perhaps the real age advantage remains that recognizing every generation holds a piece of the future. And only when we put all these pieces together will we get the whole picture. So on that note, I want to say a big thank you to Pankaj and Anushri for spending their time with us this evening, and for all of you who have been here and come back to Curiosity Talks. I will see you next time. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Anushri, and thank you, Dr. Pankaj Rai and Dr. Alva.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.